I think a lot of people nowadays find themselves caught between wanting what a spiritual or religious ideology promises them in the sense of a sense of belonging in something much bigger than themselves, be that a connection to a god or a more abstract idea, as well as feeling alienated as soon as the terms spiritual and other related terms like equinox, rebirth or rituals are used. I think, in fact, people's palate, or lack thereof, for the stereotypes of spirituality really can be at odds with a deep-seated, I'd argue instinctive desire for a sense of belonging, not only in an immediate community, but also in something far more fleeting and far more elusive. I can say from my own experience that I've felt like that, but not anymore. A few months ago, I decided off of the back of a 3-month road trip around the US, I would take the plunge and move into and work out of my car. Suffice it to say, the picturesque views I had in the US really didn't live up to the reality of living in a car in winter in the UK. So much so, one of the biggest storms ever recorded in the UK, Storm Eunice, forced me back into living with my parents, with the intention that I would once again set off on my adventure as soon as spring came around. And come around it has. Tomorrow is the 20th of March 2022, making it the vernal equinox or the spring equinox. And so what my plan is to drive over to Salisbury to see the dawn at Stonehenge, and then to drive 3 hours over to Cambridge to see one of my favourite bands perform, Wardruna, who are a Nordic Viking-esque folk band. And the reason that I bring this up is that I hate the idea that I think of myself as this modern day Viking. I think it's quite cringy. And I think we all intuitively feel that to some degree about different things. I think that potentially it's an intuitive gut reaction when we sense somebody is being superficial, when they're being a poster, when they're being something when they're purporting to be something that they're not. For instance, when I say the word spiritual, I often think of maybe a white guy with dreadlocks with as many bracelets as he can fit on his wrist, and whose entire relationship with spirituality is based off how many mushrooms he's eaten and maybe one chapter of a psychology book he read when he was 16. That being said, however, I think there is a nuance to be found here, because oftentimes I think this cringe that we feel can often prevent us from meaningfully engaging with certain things, whether that's on behalf of other people or ourselves. I think oftentimes if we were to really give ourselves sufficient room to engage with something without judgment, we may be able to derive meaning out of it. And that's exactly my plan for going into Stonehenge. So, wish me luck. So what are some of the key takeaways from my experience at Stonehenge for the 2022 Spring Equinox? Well, they say how you say something matters a lot more than what exactly it is that you're saying. And I certainly found that to be the case here. I think the judgments I went into this experience with were completely blown out of the water as soon as I began speaking to other individuals there celebrating the equinox. Sure, some of them were wearing wizards' costumes and witches' costumes, and to outsiders that might look strange. But one, who am I to judge? And secondly, what was infinitely more palpable was the sentiment they were communicating, not necessarily the words they were using to dress that up with, or in fact, what they were dressed up in regardless. It was the sentiment behind it. And I think a good example of this was like fertility, regeneration, rebirth, associated with the spring equinox. I think quite easily you could translate those words into something like seasonal affective disorder, where an individual's mood changes with the seasons. Rather than relying exclusively on a pathological model of the psyche, where we ask questions like, what is wrong with this individual? It seems more intuitive to me to rely on a more holistic context for the individual, to consider not only their psychological parameters, but also their biology and their social environment. And so, to me, it seems quite natural that an individual's temperament, their moods, obviously within certain parameters, might change with the seasons. In fact, our ancestors, how they evolved was in relationship to the land and the ebb and flow of the seasons. So, in fact, it seems quite natural to me that an individual might feel a natural smile starting to blossom on their face when the sun hits them. That warmth from the sun hits them for what feels like months that it hasn't in the dark depths of winter. This brings me to the biggest takeaway of this video and of this experience, namely that I think where a lot of people go wrong with spirituality is they think it's top down, that they have to meditate for days on end, that they have to abandon their day-to-day tasks and life in order to achieve this level of enlightenment. When in fact, I think a more bottom-up perspective is much more likely to create a transcendental experience. I mean, think about it. A bottom-up perspective where you rely on your biology, where you actually rely on those instincts that mobilize you in the day-to-day tasks of life. Those instincts have developed over the course of hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. So those instincts that you're relying on are not only based in your personal experience here and now, but on the experiences and the insights gathered by thousands of generations previously. If that isn't transcendental, I don't know what is. I can say from my own experience that every single experience I've had that I would call numinous, sacred, transcendental, whatever you want to call it, have always been derived out of action in the real world, where I've logged on in the moment to what my instincts, what my emotions are trying to communicate to me. And I think it's only when we're rooted in those direct, in the moment, present experiences that we can achieve what people might refer to as a moment of spirituality, a moment of transcendence. The spirit can't exist without the body, and I think that's what the pagans get right. I think what they get right is they celebrate more earthly experiences like the equinox, and not only do they do that, but they derive some of their spiritual identity through their identification with their ancestry, through their roots. To me, the anchoring of these spiritual experiences within a more material, physical plane, like the celebration of a spring equinox, in combination with anchoring a spiritual identity within their own ancestry, is an extremely appealing way, not only of connecting with that more spiritual, transcendental level of being, but simply a way of living. It's this instincts first, bottom-up approach to empowering an individual to embrace their own vitality, their own inner flame, that as an adventure therapist, I'm extremely passionate about. For those of you that are interested, a few times per week, I write a deep dive email on what it is to navigate the fires within, aka your instincts, with practical tools and strategies. I can say from my own experience that regular reminders of what matters most are vital in keeping me in alignment with my own internal compass. This email series is called Rekindle, and it contains my latest thinking, as well as material that may never make it to a video. So, If you're looking to finally bridge the gap between spirituality and physicality, as well as what it is to embrace your own vitality, or simply figure out what adventure therapy really is, then I'd encourage you to visit www.ignisorbis.com/rekindle to sign up now. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time.